Belgium, December 17th, 1944, 5:47 a.m. The German offensive had been moving for 11 hours. Staff Sergeant Earl Dlugosz didn't know that yet. He knew three things. He had 6 men, he had a bridge, and he had orders. Hold it until relieved. The radio had stopped working at 0300. Nobody had come to relieve them. In the darkness, his runner, Private Kessler, crawled up to his position and said 4 words. "Sarge, they're coming. A lot." Dlugosz raised his binoculars. Through the pre-dawn gray, moving through the tree line on the other side of the bridge, he could see them. Not a patrol, not a probe, a column he didn't have time to count. Later, when it was over, the German unit's own records would show 400 men and 6 armored vehicles crossing that sector. Dlugosz had 6 rifles, 4 grenades, 1 light machine gun with 200 rounds, and a broken radio. He looked at the bridge. He looked at his men. Then he looked back at the column moving toward them through the trees. He had 2 options. Every soldier in that position would have understood both of them. Option 1, blow the bridge, follow protocol, fall back, live. Option 2, hold. What Dlugosz chose and what happened in the next 8 hours was never put in any official Army report, because the Army didn't find out about it until 1971. To understand what Earl Dlugosz was doing on that bridge, you need to understand what was happening around him. December 16th, 1944. The opening day of the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last major offensive on the Western Front, 250,000 German troops, 1,000 tanks, pushing through the Ardennes forest in the dead of winter. The attack hit the American lines at their thinnest point. Nobody expected an offensive there. The terrain was too difficult, the winter too severe. The logic was wrong. American units were overrun before they could react. Communication lines collapsed within hours. Entire battalions lost contact with headquarters and had to make decisions alone, in the dark, with no information about what was happening left or right. Dlugosz and his squad had been assigned to the bridge 3 days earlier. A stone bridge over a narrow river, not strategic in the grand sense, but the kind of tactical choke point that could slow a column by hours if held, or open a corridor into the American rear if abandoned. His orders were simple. Hold the bridge. Do not blow it without explicit authorization. Wait for relief. The relief never came. Earl Dlugosz was 24 years old. He had grown up in Hamtramck, Michigan, a working-class Polish-American neighborhood outside Detroit. His father worked the line at the Dodge plant. Earl had enlisted in 1943, gone through basic at Fort Benning, shipped to England in the spring of 1944, and crossed into France 2 weeks after D-Day. By December 1944, he had survived Normandy, the hedgerow fighting, the breakout at St. Lo. He had buried men he knew well. He had learned the specific grammar of infantry combat, when to move and when to stay still, how to read terrain before the enemy could use it against you. He understood the math of his situation better than anyone. 6 men against 400. The math said one thing. Dlugosz had already decided to do something else. At 6:03 a.m., he gathered his squad in a frost-hardened ditch on the western side of the bridge. His breath made small clouds in the freezing air. The men around him were cold, underslept, and fully aware of what the binoculars had shown. Private First Class Thomas Reeder, the squad's machine gunner, 22 years old, the steadiest man under fire, later recalled the conversation in a 1971 interview. He didn't make a speech. He just said, "We're going to make them think there's more of us than there are. Fire from different positions. Move after every burst. Don't let them fix your location. Buy time." Then, Dlugosz said something Reeder never forgot. "Every hour we hold this bridge is an hour the guys behind us have to get organized. That's what we're doing here." Nobody argued. The first German probe came at 6:31 a.m. 8 men, moving in 2-man rushes, crossing the bridge from the eastern tree line. Professional, experienced. Reeder opened up with the light machine gun from a position north of the approach. Short, disciplined bursts. 2 Germans went down. The rest scattered back across the eastern bank in under 10 seconds. Then, Dlugosz's squad moved. Every man shifted position in the 3 minutes of silence that followed. When the Germans tried to locate the American firing positions, those positions no longer existed. The second probe came at 7:15 a.m. 12 men approaching from 2 directions simultaneously, a sound tactic against a properly manned position. Dlugosz let them get halfway across the bridge before he gave the order. All 6 Americans opened fire at once from 3 different positions. On a narrow stone bridge with no cover and water on both sides, the effect was immediate and total. The probe collapsed in 90 seconds. The Germans stopped moving. 40 minutes of silence followed. Dlugosz didn't allow himself to interpret it as anything good. They were bringing up something heavier. At 7:58 a.m., a German half-track moved to the edge of the eastern tree line. Its 20mm gun began working over the American positions, not the bridge itself, which they needed intact, but the ditches and hedgerows where Americans might be hiding. Dlugosz pulled his men back 20 meters, too far to cover the bridge surface effectively, but alive. The Germans read the pullback as abandonment and began crossing. He let 40 men get onto the bridge before he gave the order to fire. A bridge is a killing ground, nowhere to go, forward, back, or into the water. The fire came from 2 angles simultaneously. The infantry compressed and stalled. The half-track couldn't fire without hitting its own men. In the confusion, Dlugosz moved his squad to a stone wall 50 meters west of the bridge, a position he had identified 3 days earlier when he first arrived. He had walked the ground before the fighting started. He had thought about what a withdrawal would look like before anyone started shooting. Between 8:30 a.m. and 11 a.m., the Germans made 4 more crossing attempts. None succeeded. The second attempt brought the half-track onto the bridge deck, infantry sheltering behind it. Dlugosz sent Corporal Janowski, the best arm in the squad, to a flanking position with both anti-tank grenades. Janowski waited until the vehicle committed to the crossing, then threw the first grenade at 15 meters. It took out the left track assembly. The half-track was now an immobile obstacle on the bridge deck, blocking the very crossing it was supposed to open. The infantry had no way forward and no cover. They pulled back, abandoning the vehicle. The bridge was now physically narrowed by wreckage. The third and fourth attempts were infantry only, smaller, more cautious. The German commander, later identified as Major Hans Bruckner of the 12th SS Panzer Division's Reconnaissance Battalion, was operating under orders to move fast and avoid extended engagements. His own after-action report, recovered from German archives in 1968, described the resistance at the bridge as coming from an estimated American company in prepared defensive positions. A company is 80 to 200 men. Bruckner had been held for 5 hours by 6. At 11:23 a.m., Dlugosz's situation changed in ways he could no longer absorb. Private Kessler took a rifle round through the left shoulder while repositioning, mobile but one-armed. Corporal Janowski had been pinned after throwing the grenades and pulled back 100 meters out of the fight. 4 functional men, 23 rounds of machine gun ammunition, 2 grenades, no radio. Dlugosz gathered what remained of his squad behind the stone wall. German fire was probing its surface, methodical, thorough. The wall held. Stone built by Belgian farmers in the previous century had turned out to be adequate cover against 20mm fire. "We've done what we can do here," he said. "We're going to blow the bridge and fall back." Reader raised the obvious problem. Explicit authorization to blow the bridge, not received. Radio broken since 0300, no authorization coming. Dlugosz looked at him. "Write it down. Everything. Times, positions, decisions, rounds fired. If we make it back, someone needs to know what happened here." Reader pulled his field notebook from inside his jacket, dry because he had kept it against his body, and started writing. Dlugosz picked up the demolition charges and went back to the bridge alone. The work took 11 minutes. Setting charges correctly on a stone bridge, on the load-bearing columns rather than the deck, requires specific placement. He had paid attention during demolition training at Fort Benning. A German round hit the bridge surface 8 meters from where he was working. Stone chips cut his left forearm through his jacket. He kept working. He set the charges on both central support columns, ran the wire back to the western bank, moved the squad back 40 meters, detonated. The bridge came down at 11:41 a.m. Both central spans collapsed into the river, taking the wrecked half-track with them. The river was narrow but deep and fast-moving. In December, crossing it without a bridge meant something specific about survival. The crossing was closed. The 6 men moved west through the Ardennes forest for the rest of the afternoon. 5 walking, Kessler supported between 2 others. His field dressing replaced at 1 p.m. with a strip of reader's undershirt when the original soaked through. Dlugosz navigated by terrain memory and compass. He moved them parallel to the road rather than on it. Roads during a German offensive were not places where small groups of Americans wanted to be found. At 3:17 p.m., they walked into a forward outpost of the 30th Infantry Division. The sergeant at the position, a man from Mississippi named Calhoun, looked at the 6 men coming out of the trees. Filthy. One of them bleeding, all of them moving with the specific weight of men who had been awake and in combat since before dawn. "Where did you come from?" Dlugosz told him. Calhoun stared. "That bridge? We've been trying to figure out why that column took so long to move. We had people across the river by 1400. We were ready for them 3 hours before they showed up." Dlugosz said nothing. "How many of you were there?" 6. Calhoun looked at the 6 men, looked back at Dlugosz. Didn't say anything else. There are moments where the words available aren't equal to what has happened. No official report was ever filed. In the chaos of the Bulge, the largest land battle in American military history, 6 men holding a minor crossing for 8 hours didn't generate paperwork that survived the process. Dlugosz returned to his unit, was wounded in February 1945 at the Siegfried Line, and was discharged in September. He went back to Hamtramck, worked at the Dodge plant for 31 years, same as his father, married a woman named Helen in 1947, 3 children. He never talked about the bridge, not to Helen, not to his children, not to the men at his VFW post who traded stories on Friday nights. He listened. He never told his own. In 1971, military historian David Gaines was cross-referencing German after-action reports from the opening days of the Bulge with American unit records. He found Bruckner's report, the 5-hour delay, the description of estimated company strength in prepared positions. He tracked the American unit, tracked the squad, tracked the name. He found an address in Hamtramck, Michigan. He knocked on the door on a Tuesday afternoon. Dlugosz answered, 51 years old, reading glasses, a man who looked like he had worked with his hands his whole life. Gaines showed him the German report. Dlugosz read it in the doorway, read it a second time. "Come in," he said. "I'll put on coffee." The interview lasted 6 hours. Reader, contacted separately in Akron, confirmed every detail independently. Times, positions, decisions, the accounts matched exactly. At the end, Gaines asked the question he had been building toward for 6 hours. Why had he never told anyone? Dlugosz held his coffee cup without drinking from it. 6 men held a bridge. The guys at Bastogne held a town. The guys at Omaha held a beach. What we did was just a bridge. He set the cup down. But it was our bridge, and we held it. That was enough. Major Bruckner's battalion spent 5 hours against 6 Americans on December 17, 1944. Military historians don't attribute major outcomes to those 5 hours alone. The Bulge was decided by 100 factors over 6 weeks. But 5 hours in the mathematics of an armored offensive is not nothing. And 6 men, in the mathematics of a war involving millions, is not nothing either. Dlugosz died in 1998. He was 78 years old. His obituary mentioned his 31 years at Dodge, his wife Helen, his 3 children, his VFW membership, his service in World War II. It did not mention the bridge. Some stories wait a long time to be told. Would you have made the same call as Dlugosz? 6 men, 400 Germans, a broken radio, and orders nobody was coming to update. Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the men history forgot to write down, subscribe. There are more of them than you'd think.